So another punching one. Punching's cool, right? I'm not like a martial artist. I just enjoy contemplating like movement, flow, right? So if you're gonna hit fluidically, you're fundamentally you're throwing all the water is gonna be flowing that way. So to hit fluidically, you feel everything flow into the movement, like everything. And what this does in terms of your biomechanics isn't necessarily like pushing off the ground or any sequence of events like that. That stuff's going to happen. To get the whole thing to flow that way, right? And if you can get the whole thing to flow that way, you found your fluid self, right? So then feeling the full thing, right? The whole thing's important, as if it's just a glob of water, right? You can't have a section of it that's more important. So to move fluidically, nothing breaks. There's a little bit of wiggle room with this, which we call your like fluidic feel, but it's like swimming. So the whole thing can flow, and when you're seeing things fluidically, all the mechanics break down in terms of like fluid dynamics. So there's only waves, and the waves crash, right? So the whole thing is going to wave, and the whole thing crashes. And this is what people are doing when they're good. Guys move from here, right? But the qigong elements of it, or if you're in shape, you're moving fluidically, right? And it's like, oh, how do you know how to do this? Well, this is how the part of you that does things behaves. The eye, or the awareness, is fluidic. So if you study your natural movement patterns, you're going to come up with techniques that look fluidic, but that's just how you move. So when I say like, oh, just flow into the hand, or crash, or wave, right? Like the fluid mass of the body can only flow. So how is it going to flow? You want it to be flowing there, and how can it generate force? How can the fluidic part of the body participate in generating force where something hits something else? Well, that's a wave crashing. So the water in the body is going to have, for it to participate in an impact, it has to wave and crash. That's the only way that water does the thing. So that technique, what is it? The technique's super simple. It's because this is just one thing of water. So how is it going to move to wave? Like, picture the whole thing crashing from the toes all the way to the thing. The whole body crashes. Like, what's the ankle technique? What's the ground technique? It's the whole thing flows, the whole thing crashes, the whole thing waves, and then the whole thing is swimming in basically physio-emotional water. So that whole thing that's waving, crashing, or whatever is in a medium that, like, it gets denser if the atmosphere gets amped up, and the fluidic part of you can do more things. But So the fluidic participation in the kick is still, I have to crash like with all of my body. So I'm also going to be flowing that way, and that requirement of like crashing is what causes the hip to turn over at the end. Like, I know people coach that stuff, and it's just, if you want it if you want your consciousness or your fluidic nature to participate, the whole thing has to crash, because it is one. So anything it's not doing as one, it's not doing together. So if it's mixed, it's not crashing. It's just kind of like, right? That's what the water is doing in the body. The possibilities of what the water is doing is also the possibilities of what the mind are doing and how the mind is engaging with the situation. The mind engages with the situation primarily through the expression of what water is capable of doing. So that determines like the emotional and like energetic or the movement potentials of the body. So again, like I don't box. I don't do martial arts. Like I just like to think about movement. And not even movement, just like you can see if you mistime it, you'll send waves, and like the wave will start to crash before it gets there, and you'll perceive that as effort or muscles firing at the wrong time. Whereas if it just flows, right? And this is all nice and theoretical, because it's like, oh yeah, I can swim now, but if they're punching back or if it's scary, like this is kind of a skill. You could forget how to do it. And then all of a sudden the technique for this effortless wave power is off, and your muscles or your mind starts getting in the way of what the water wants to do. When people say get in the way of the body or the muscle memory, it's like what the water wants to do. The water wants to flow, crash, and move as one. And so that you can turn like these steps into flowing. It's one of the options of the water, right? Is it And so the way to incorporate a part of the body into a mechanic is to get it to start crashing, get this down here to start crashing up there. And not just this, but get everything to start crashing. If you can get the fluid to crash on the movement, or if you can get the fluid to flow on a movement, you're automatically de facto incorporating all of the body mechanics, or all of the different efforts. The different efforts just come up as like as you get tired from doing it fluidically, the effort spring. It's like a mistake, right? right? So I can go into anywhere and practice crashing, like my spine, inside of my skull. You know, legs. Can I get my heels to crash into the thing? And because the punch is that crashing, so if that body of water that is my like thigh or my shin bone is timed such that it crashes on the impact, the water's participating. And again, there's no reason to overthink this, because anytime you're not thinking and just moving and just being and not getting in the way, you're doing this. You could go back and look at the recording, and you go, oh, I was moving like water. Is it because I learned that way, or is it because, right? So when you learn to move fluidically, like if you really learn how to move fluidically, something weird has gone on there because you've learned to move naturally. And so when something's coming at you, if you crash it, it doesn't push you. There's no current back. You like crash into it, and then you get these resets. So when people are doing high speed, you're dealing with like your fluidic mass. So what's the fastest way you can get water to turn around? And it's like a very inward crash with an outward explosion. So any movement point where they're generating explosive power, and it's kind of just doing really crazy crash flows. I don't know, it's wild. People just naturally figure this stuff out. It's just the correct technique or movement pattern is to move like a single wave, to crash, to understand crashing, direction changes, how to explosively like just break out of a pattern, right? That's what water's doing when it crashes. It's like this tremendous energy is coming in. Water just breaks the pattern. So to do that, you have to that's all you have. You have waving, you have currents, right? Currents when a body of water is moving together. That's what a current is, right? So if everything goes there, all the water goes there. And so a current is different from a crash. Anyway, I mean that's like what is water going to do? It's going to go back and forth. It can crash. The wave can basically crack open at any point. With like full independence from the pattern. Like water can be entirely carrying a pattern, so a momentum and a direction, and the crashing is just so when are you not doing that, right? When are you not flowing like water, right? When is this happening? It's when the water is full of bubbles. If the water is full of eddies, like if the currents are going in opposing directions, then even though the body of water is still connected, it doesn't act like a single body of water. It acts like two different separate currents. So just any sort of thoughts, random perceptions, the frothing or the currentness like breaks the composition of the body. So you have waves crashing in multiple directions, currents flowing in multiple directions, cavitations happening where there's not crashing. Right? Cavitation is when the water is breaking out of the pattern, but without the crashing of the wave. It's like the wave churning itself, sort of, right? So, if you stop getting in its way or having it do other things, then yeah, you naturally start to cohere into single-minded attention. What's single-minded attention? It's when all the water is doing the same thing. The water isn't in two different compartments. It's not compartmentalized. There's not two attentions. It's just if there's contradictory currents, it doesn't behave single-minded. Like this is churning that way and this is on top of it, and they don't work as one. But anytime that you study and analyze it, you go, oh, that's the same. It's the same thing. It's a single body of water. Okay. But it's all the water can, I can feel it. Is it participating in the current or not? You're doing a roll call. You're doing body scanning. Is all of the vasculature, all the skin, all the muscles, is everything flowing? Is it all crashing at the same time? Even my ability to detect that can change over time. What am I detecting that with? What am I detecting the state of my consciousness with? Right? Water is this thing intimately tied to awareness, but what is aware of that? Well, the hint is light or conceptualization, understanding. But what is that? It's just thinking, right? Anyway.